So is my screen visible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
This will be very problematic for me if I have to keep on giving the permissions. I cannot start off with the lecture. So any other student cannot give the permission?
Ma'am, is it because you are not using institute ID?
No, it's institute ID. But I'll figure this out after today's lecture. I'm so sorry for the inconvenience. I actually did. So should I enable this one?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, fine. Then we'll resume. So as I was saying, negotiation is a skill that we will keep on coming across as we ascend the ladder of our professional development and academic development. And it's a very crucial skill. So there are certain principles of negotiations we will be talking about, and we'll talking about what are the factors that influence negotiation. One of the examples I gave was wherein you go to a grocery market and you try to negotiate the price with the seller. So one thing you must always remember is that when you're negotiating something with a person involved, it is always about the issue. And you must learn to separate the people you are negotiating with from the issues. If you confuse the two, then the goal of negotiation becomes more of a personal attack in which the two parties have sort of removed their focus on the issue they're talking about and have reduced the discussion to blaming and playing. So whenever you are negotiating something, it's always important to focus on the issue and not the people involved. So learn to separate yourself from the issues. And so negotiation sometimes we think is a sort of conflict, but even when you are in a conflict, for example, with your team members or the idea or regarding the execution of a particular project or a particular theme that you're focusing on, always bring back yourself deliberately to focus on the issue and not the person. And the corollary to that is that do not be influenced by the person you are negotiating with. Sometimes what happens is in meetings when we are in corporate, sometimes we have to present our ideas or prototype to our managers or the managers of their managers. Sometimes it is very natural to get intimidated by the presence of people who are more experienced than us and who are at a higher ladder in the hierarchy and who have much more knowledge than us. And at these times we sort of cower in our own seats. But then again, focus on the issue and don't be intimidated or influenced with the people with whom you are negotiating with. That is the main thing. First, to separate the issue on which you are negotiating from the people involved. Now, there are two main reasons for it. If you separate yourself from the issues, then it will help you to prevent from seeing objections to your position as a personal attack. So, for example, if I'm professing a certain position in a discussion, okay, and someone does not agree to my idea and they question it, if I'm too attached to my issue, then it will be very difficult for me to isolate their views and to take it whether they are questioning my issue or on attacking me. So even though we are so tempted to attach I-ness or myness or my idea with myself, it is always healthy to keep a distance between our position or our views and ourselves, so that when someone questions it or raises some conflicting point, then we can tackle it in a healthy manner. The second aspect of this is if we separate people from the issues, then we will not damage the relationships with the people we are negotiating with. So again, if you have to raise some concerns or questions with someone else's point of view, then you have to look and see that the person involved and the position he or she is professing are two very different things. And when you can actually see this and
Ma'am,
yeah,
ma'am, I think screen is frozen. Yours is screen.
sorry,
Ma'am, your screen is frozen. We are not
I'm
able
on
to
the same slide. I'm on the same slide.
Ma'am, your screen
Can't
is
see any
frozen.
slide.
Your slide.
Ma'am, your meet screen is visible.
Okay. So maybe for these queries, you can ask in the chat box so that we can know. So my screen is fine now. Can you see?
Only white.
Sorry.
There is only white screen.
Okay. Let me share again. Now, are you able to see now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. So that is the fundamental principle of negotiation, to separate the people you are negotiating with from the issues. And it is one of the very important skills as a negotiator you can possess.
Ma'am, are you presenting any slides?
Yes, I am.
Ma'am, we are just able to see the meet screen. You should means present your whole screen, entire screen, rather than a window or a tab.
I'm actually presenting my screen. Now, can you see the slides now?
Yes,
ma'am.
yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So when it comes to negotiation, there are always three problems: perception, emotions, and communication. So when we talk about perception, the way we perceive a certain idea professed by someone or their own views, there is always a difference in perception when it comes to people involved. Two people who have grown up in a very different kind of environment, in a very different kind of context, when they come together to work on a project or they take up some extremely important responsibility, then it is quite natural that the clashes of ideas will be there, because the perception to look at things differs. And when you are negotiating, you must always remind yourself consciously and deliberately that this person who is standing in front of you is bound to have different perception than you, and it is his or her prerogative. And when you keep this idea and this fact in your mind, that there is a perception difference between the two of you, then the dealing of negotiation becomes much more issue centric rather than people centric. So, and it's always difficult to think from the other person's point of view, but it is one of the very important skills that will take you very ahead in your dealings in your life, not only academic but also professional, especially because most of the things that we are able to accomplish in our lives are based out of team projects. And when we talk about teams, we have to consider into our psyche that people are having different perceptions. And then again, it is very easy to blame others when we are trying to negotiate. But again, every time you are tempted to blame someone or to attack someone's position, bring your focus back to the issue that you're trying to solve and separate the issue from the person. So difference in perception is one of the challenges when it comes to negotiation. And this one you should always remember. So as you can see in this bit, to each of them, their position looks clear. But if these were to shift, then they would have a aha moment that, oh yes, my friend is actually saying what he is seeing, and from his position it looks like 6, and from my position it looks like 9. So in the end, both of us are not exactly right and not exactly wrong. And that is why it is important to sort of digest and absorb the fact that perception differences are always there. So this is a very small psychological experiment. Look at this picture. And what do you see in this picture? Who are you seeing? Is the picture visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So look at this picture and what exactly do you see?
A woman looking backward.
Huh?
A lady looking backward.
Behind.
Okay.
Lady is looking behind.
Okay. And anyone else who sees something else?
Old lady.
Huh? So you can see that there is a young woman who is looking behind. She has something on her head and a scarf. What else do you look at? Do you see only one woman, or is there any other character in this picture?
An old lady.
An old lady.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Old lady.
Yeah.
A young
So
woman.
can all of you can you see the old lady?
No,
Look
ma'am.
at this. So imagine. Can you see my cursor?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Looking at the young woman is easy. Look. So think of this as the nose of the old woman, and this as her chin. Okay.
Oh,
So if you can visualize
Yes, ma'am.
like this, if this is the nose of the woman and this is the chin, then you can actually see this is an old lady. And so this is a very common psychological experiment in which this pic is distributed to students, and students are asked, what do you see? And then obviously some say that it's a young woman, some say it's an old woman, but then when they try to explain to each other, they're able to understand that both of them exist in the same picture. And that is the thing with perception, that perception is not always based on facts, because it's individualized way in which a person is looking at the situation. So whenever you're dealing with any kind of negotiation with any person, try to understand from where the person is coming from, in sense his or her perception. Please mute someone's mic is on. Thank you. The second thing when we talk about negotiations are emotions. We cannot deny that humans are highly social creatures and deeply embedded in emotions and feelings. So when we are talking about negotiating with someone, we have to space special emphasis on that the person in front of us, as much as we would like to think that it's a rational person, as a logical person, but almost always there is always a mix of rational logic and emotions. So then again, it is easy to get drowned in continuous back and forth and sometimes altercations also if we do not separate people from the issues. For example, you are trying to negotiate the taxi fare with the driver, and if you cannot listen to him and his concerns that he why he's holding a particular position, and then he cannot understand why you are holding a particular position, then coming at a consensual point is very difficult. So in order to arrive at a position which is profitable to you also and to other person also, so that means there is loss minimized on both the ends. That means you have to understand the perception of the person and the emotion of the person, and that is why you have to acknowledge the emotions and understand why the other person is feeling the way he or she is. And you can sometimes ask also, okay, why do you feel this? And when you pitch in for more, then they will tell you or explain to you the reason behind their position or what they are saying. So this continuous dialogue of asking questions from the person is really helpful when it comes to arriving at a suitable position for negotiation. So as much as you would expect me to talk about business and technology in this class, we cannot avoid that people skills and people's psychology. Understanding human psychology is extremely important whenever we are delivering a product or service, a talk, or even talking to our professors or to our fellow mates. If we can really understand how a human mind operates and how human mind thinks, and what are the expectations of the other mind, obviously justified expectations, then according to them and according to us both, then it becomes very easy to generate a win-win situation rather than a win-loss situation or a loss-win situation. And when people feel acknowledged for experiencing what they are, then they will be more open to receiving your ideas or your notions or your point of views. If we bluntly refuse people's ideas or refuse their right to hold the position they are holding, then we will arrive at a deadlock and the negotiation or the peaceful tract or agreement will not be feasible. So understand to separate issues from the people, try to understand the perception they are holding, understand the emotion that is asking them to generate that particular point of view or idea, and then comes communication. Sometimes, all of us are on this road to become better, become more functional, and become better functioning humans in our world. And in that, communication holds a very, very important position. A right thing, a right point of view, expressed in a very poor manner, in a very inconsiderate manner, can blow up the entire project and even blow out the entire negotiation and deal. However, if you can learn to communicate what you're feeling in a much more polite, humble, but firm manner, then it will be easier and much more feasible to arrive at a position at which negotiation sounds healthy. And for communication to take place, we have to cultivate the habit of listening. Most of us have this habit of listening to the other person while the other person is saying. We in our mind are weaving stories of how to respond, and rather than actually listening to the person. Most of us do this when we're actually listening to someone. However, we must actively practice the art of active listening, in which when a person says something and when it's our turn to say something back, we not only reply or respond, but we actually sort of paraphrase and summarize what the other person has said, so that the other person can feel that we have actually heard her, listened to her, and then we are trying to make a point. So communication also becomes, and the way of communication becomes extremely important when you are dealing with your future venture capitalists or your future recruitment or employees, and or even your team members or your professors, even people you are dealing with on a daily basis while handling your daily chores. Even in your family, communication matters a lot. And this is something that we are not formally taught, but as we grow, we really learn how to communicate. And one unfortunate thing about communication is, especially in our society, is that we are always taught to become better in a professional manner, in an academic manner. So we read books about like how to become a good professional or how to win friends and family members and books like that. And we really work on our professional skills. But again, other aspect of life is our personal lives also. So there also we have to learn about perceptions, emotions, communications, and learning to separate issues from the people. So for example, in this pic, you can see that the woman is saying, do you even hear the words I say? And here she is selectively listening. So selective listening can be very much detrimental to the negotiation that people are talking about, because selective listening means I'm just listening what favors me. I'm just here for myself. I'm just here for to achieve my goals and my aims from this meeting. However, the other person, when you come from this point of view, you naturally cannot stop triggering the same thinking in the other person. Then it becomes a battle of egos, and battle of egos is not very healthy to arrive at a cooperative stance, a win-win stand, wherein negotiation can be fruitful. So for good negotiation, focus on the interests of the included parties as opposed to their positions. If the negotiations are focused on position, then conversation is framed around potential winners and losers. So by position, I mean that if I hold a particular position, that this should be this way, and it is not mapping up to your ideas, then instead of directly refuting my right to have that position or that idea, you must ask the other person, okay, why do you feel so? Chances are a non-judgmental questioning, which is coming from curiosity rather than from the point of judgment, can actually work miracles for your short-term associations and long-term associations. And it is my experience that the way you treat people when you meet them or work with them for the first time speaks a lot about how that association will prosper 10 years down the line or 20 years down the line. So every interaction that you come across in your life from today onwards, think to yourself and say to yourself, what do I want to create out of this? What is the impression, the long-term impression I want to create? And what do I want to learn from this? And because time is everything in our life goes in a flux manner. So we never know what is going to happen. So that is why it helps to sometimes remove ourselves from getting in our own way and focusing on the problems and the interest, and and being open to the questions and asking the questions. And when you are tempted to attack, then bring back your attention to the issue, to the project, to the innovation project you are doing, and then discuss it from there on. Sometimes it will be very difficult to arrive at a solution when it comes to negotiations, and that is where brainstorming comes into picture. And negotiations do not have to be, zero-sum game. It's not that someone loses and someone wins. It can be something called as win-win situation, which Stephen Covey talks about in his book 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. You must read that book, and its PDF is also available freely online. I will definitely ask you to read that book. It helps in cultivating certain character skills which are really useful when we are entering into a job market or a project or a corporate market. So when it comes to negotiations, obviously there is no one particular solution. So you have to look out for options, and not only options that feed your position, but an option that feeds both the parties. Because when the other party can see that you are in this negotiation not only for your aims and your objectives, but the collective objective, then it naturally opens up. The other party opens up. It sort of lubricates the conversation between the two parties, and things flow in a much more better manner. And after the negotiation, you have to assess all the options. And one of the ways to assess the options is identifying an objective criteria. For example, I will give you a very simple example to sort this out. For example, Government of India has launched this Ayushman Bharat scheme. Anyone aware of this scheme? Am I audible?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Okay. So Ayushman Bharat scheme is a health insurance scheme for poor households in India. So people who are below poverty line, the current government has said that it will give 5 lakh rupees for these families for their health insurance. And if I as a researcher want to assess that how effective this scheme is, because it started in 2018 and it's dealing in its first phases, and if I want to understand and negotiate with the government, and I'm a researcher and I want to understand how the scheme is doing, then obviously I need an objective criteria to assess the efficacy of this scheme. And that is where the objective criteria comes up. When you and your party are negotiating with something and you're not able to arrive at a particular answer, then you have to identify an objective criteria in which the solution can be assessed. And based on that objective criteria, the decisions can be taken. One very important thing in negotiations is, and it is extremely hard because as humans, we are selfish and rigid, very rigid. But But if we have some amount of curiosity and we consciously stop getting in our own way, then negotiation can actually proceed in a fruitful manner. And for that, we have to keep an open mind. I remember I was in third year at Samsung, and I mean in fifth year at Samsung, and I was leaving for some work, and this head of my department had come and had said, Yashoda, learn to keep an open mind. And at that time, I had no idea what it meant. And whenever people tell us have an open mind, we generally think, oh, I already have an open mind. What are you talking about? And but it was quite later I realized what he was saying. And then, so having an open mind is really a conscious process. None of us are, created in a manner in which we have all the good and desirable qualities. It's a very conscious effort. And similarly, when it comes to negotiation, you have to really understand the other person and look at him with a bit of trust also. A bit of trust goes a long way in creating fruitful negotiations, and understand why he or she is having that perception, emotion, and then try to communicate in a more respectable manner what you are saying. And if you think that the other party is extremely being unreasonable, so for example, you have to go 10 kilometers by an auto and this person is saying 300, 350, and it's absolutely an unreasonable demand, you should probably go out and seek some other auto, or probably book Ola or Uber. So it's a difficult task when you are juggling with two things, but focus on your intuition also, focus on the logic also, and try to arrive at a win-win situation. So the SMART objective criteria is a very commonly used criteria when it comes to objective assessment of any project or any output of a big project. So SMART basically means what you are trying to measure should be specific. So in case of, for example, the health insurance scheme, I would want to measure how many people have been covered since the inception of the scheme. The number of people, it's a very specific. Then it should be measurable. That means you should be able to quantify it. It should be achievable. It means that if you have said that you are going to measure a number of people and how they have changed over a period of time, you should be able to achieve it in a time-bound manner. So time is also very important when it comes to criteria, and relevant. So the objective criteria that you are using or what you're trying to measure has to be relevant to the problem that you are considering. So for example, for this health insurance scheme, if I'm trying to measure something else, for example, if the people are able to have a housing or not, then this may or may not be relevant directly to the health insurance schemes. And that is why whenever we talk about evaluation of the outcome of the negotiation, we have to look at the objective criteria, which should generally be very smart in nature. These are two important videos for illustration. I will show you one video. It's from a foreign university. The second video is a bit longer than the first one, but I strongly urge you to look at it in your own free time, probably today after the lecture. So is my browser visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Baron Helmuth. Professor in you. I'd like you to think of negotiation as the question of how people go about dividing a pie. You can think of the pie as a Boston cream pie, a cherry pie. The pie is going to be our image of what it is that people are negotiating over. It's what's at stake. To illustrate what I mean, let's start with a pie of size 9 and two parties, Abe and B. If these two are your stereotypical negotiators, you might expect things to go down as follows. Abe says, I want the whole pie. And B responds, no, I want the whole pie. Naturally, that's what they each want, but that's really not an argument. Each claim for the pie is equally valid or equally invalid. My perspective is that negotiation should be done using principled arguments. Simply asking for the whole pie isn't a principled argument. The way I want you to think of negotiation is much more like a math problem, as opposed to a tug of war or an acting session with bluffing and posturing and lying. By looking at negotiation as a math problem, it allows you to be dispassionate and allows you to better understand what's really at stake. Our first goal is to understand what is the pie. We'll stick with the example where A and B together can create something of size 9. Of course, the negotiation might not be successful. Thus, we also have to ask what happens if this negotiation fails. In that case, Abe and B will go out and do something on their own. If Abe goes out on his own, we'll imagine he can create a pie of size 1 without any help from B. And B can create something of size 2 without any help from A. So now we have all the facts on the table. Moreover, both Abe and B know all of this. Everybody knows everything. There's nothing hidden. There's no room for bluffing. All the cards are face up and on the table. It seems obvious that the two of them should reach an agreement, as the size of pie is much bigger than what they can create on their own. But to get there, they have to agree on how to divide it up. Abe might propose what seems like the simplest and fairest solution of all. Just divide the 9 in 2, so that both parties get 4.5. B counters that she should get 6 while A gets 3. Why? Well, B is twice as strong as A. She is worth twice as much as Abe on her own, and so we should divide the pie into 3 equal parts. B gets 2 of the 3, and A 1 of the 3. That leads to 6 for B and 3 for A. I don't think either of these proposals is right. I think what you have to look at is what Abe and B can get on their own compared to what they can get together. On their own, Abe can get 1 and B can get 2. So really what they're negotiating over is not a pie of size 9, but a pie of size 6. Why is that? Well, if they don't reach an agreement, Abe and B on their own can get 1 and 2. So their motivation for reaching an agreement is to increase the pie from 1 plus 2 or 3 all the way up to 9. That's a gain of 6. Another way of saying this is that of the 9, Abe can automatically claim a slice of 1. He doesn't need B's help to do that. There you go, a slice of size 1. And similarly, B can get something of size 2 on her own without any help from A. We should probably make it look a little bit more like it's twice as big. There we go. If they come out and work together, that's another 6 that they can get. And here's the big point. Abe needs B just as much as B needs A to get that extra 6. B could try to make the claim, oh, I can get twice as much as you if we don't work together, so I have twice the claim to the pie. I want 4, and you can have 2 because I'm twice as strong as you. But if Abe says, nope, that doesn't work for me, I'm walking away, that extra 6 is lost. Similarly, if A asks for too much and B says, no, 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 I'm not going for it, that 6 is also lost. At the end of the day, B needs A just as much as A needs B. Since they have equal power, what I think they should do is split the 6. The real pie, the real negotiation, is about how to split that 6. When the two sides realize that they are in a perfectly symmetric position, the 6 ends up getting split evenly, 3 and 3. What that means is that Abe gets the 1 on his own plus another 3 from the 6, or 4 in total, and B gets 2 from what she could have got on her own plus another 3 from the 6, or 5 in total. Now this example is simple by design in the sense that there's no uncertainty, everybody knows what they're negotiating over, but it illustrates the fundamental point that underlies all negotiation. It emphasizes what is the pie, why are we having the conversation, what's at stake. In the real world, no one goes and says to you, this is the pie, or people may not even know exactly what the pie is. But the same principles apply when you look at problems that are more complicated. Indeed, the more complicated the problem, the more important it is to have a principle.
So I hope that video gave you a bit about knowledge about how to tackle negotiations. The second video is a much more interesting video. I think it's more than 10 or 12 minutes. It talks about negotiating on the airfare bills between two universities. So please do have a look at it today to understand negotiation better. Now, having talked about negotiation and already knowing now that we have to learn to separate issues from people consciously and know about perception, emotions, and the importance of communication, we must also understand the barriers to a good negotiation. So there are three common obstacles in negotiation: when the other party is extremely powerful than us, when the other party does not use principal negotiation. For example, in the video you saw that remaining six piece of the pies were left, and the other party was saying, because I'm contributing more, so I should get the more. But the other party said, Abe said that we should divide it. So both of them need each other at the same time to increase their profits or increase what they get back to their homes. So this is why principal negotiation is important. When the other party is not using principal negotiation, then the deal has to be called off. And the third situation, which is quite tricky for negotiations, is when the other party is resorting to unlawful or illegal means or playing dirty tricks. So how do we deal with these kind of obstacles? Now we will be discussing that. So when the other party is more powerful, then no need to automatically arrive at a lower position and play small. So even though you know that your position is not that strong, again I will say the same thing: bring back your attention to the issue. You do not have to naturally cow down in a corner of a room when you already know that the other party is powerful. You have to pitch in your idea as confidently as if the power did not matter, although it does. But you don't have to develop bottom lines or to compromise on things that you think should not be compromised in. So that is one thing. So you have to take that the other party is more powerful, take that fact into account, but don't let it distort what you want to get out of the negotiation. And you don't have to be in a loss position when you automatically see this. And that is why you have to arrive at best alternatives to a negotiated agreement and express it to the other party. And but if the power equations cannot be solved, then you will have to automatically at last walk away from the negotiation. But going into a negotiation, you must always be aware about where you stand and where the other party stands. I think knowing about this power can go a long way in dealing with the negotiation in a much more healthy, logical, and down to earth manner. When the other party does not use principal negotiation, so then you have to remind them of these principles. So, for example, one of the manifestations in which the party is not using principal negotiations is that they are close to ideas. They're so rigid in the way they want things that they're not willing to listen to you. And instead of focusing on the ideas, they're focusing on the organization or your product, your service, or the people involved. And the third thing would be they are in the negotiation only to seek the gains. And at this point, it becomes very, very complicated situation to arrive at a negotiation. But a skilled negotiator, and you must write this in your diaries or notebooks or anywhere, so that you remind yourself every day, the world does not operate the way you want to operate. The world is not here to serve you, your whims and fancies, and that is why walking away at the drop of hat is not always the option. You have to be in that situation, in that discordant and uncomfortable situation, and then try to see what is it that I can still take out of this. And thus, when you are in such a kind of situation, again, bring back your attention to the problem and avoid playing the counter attacks. Avoid focusing on the behavior of the other person. As much as we are tempted to deal with that in that manner, again, the negotiation will not be fruitful if it becomes a personal attack communication. Because if they can see that you are attacking their ideas, then they will attack your idea, they will attack you as a person, and they will not be open to coming to negotiations. So you really have to be a bigger person when you are in certain kind of situations, because ultimately what do you want to create out of that interaction? You want to create something which is useful for you and also useful for the party, so that both of you gain from the negotiation. And if you can keep your focus on that, then dealing with, childish things, personal attack things, and blaming things, it becomes much more easier to handle. So now on, when you will be working in your group projects, and you deal with certain kind of things, at that time you try to apply this thing to focus on the issue and not the person. As much as you do not like the party or the person involved or their teams involved, again, consciously try to bring yourself into the position. Asking questions is a very good way to melt down the ice between the two parties. And when you ask questions, again, communication matters a lot, rather than making the other person or their ideas feel inferior or not worth water. You have to really respect the ideas of the other person, acknowledge them, and then try to express your ideas also. So these are certain tactics you will learn and perfect with time. The third case when the other party uses dirty tricks is that, first of all, you have to make them aware that you have identified that and you would like clarity from them on this one. If they are obfuscating, if they are prevaricating, if they are not very clear, then you know that the people you are dealing with are falling short of certain ethics and integrity required for negotiation. If it doesn't work, you have to take it or leave it. Otherwise, again, do not just walk away from meetings when you see something which is not exactly right at the first point. You need to probe into it deeper and then really try to understand why the other person is feeling that. Because conflicts and, as I said, the world does not operate to feed us. Conflicts and dirty tricks will be very, very, very common in real world. And so we do not live in ideal world, sadly, but we can operate from an ideal point of view. And then we have to ask questions and really try to probe deeper into why this person is behaving like that, or why they are holding this kind of position, what are their interests. Because when you can actually go deeper, then you have objective facts to take a decision, to take a judgment, whether you should carry forward with this negotiation or walk away. So the greatest obstacle to getting what we really want in life is sometimes we ourselves. So we have to teach ourselves not to get in our own way. When we can keep a distance from the negotiation or from the problem under hand, then we can look at it in a much more objective and scientific manner. If we are too much involved in that and become very personal, then it becomes really very difficult for not only for you, but for the other party also. So that was about how to deal with negotiations when there are obstacles to negotiation. These are 2 articles. In fact, so these are actually, this is a summary to the book, Getting 2 Yes. It deals about negotiation. The second is Women Do Not Ask. So it's about negotiating the job offers and the salary offers right from the very beginning when you're starting your professional life. So I would strongly recommend you to read these 2. It's a very, since it's a summary, so it's around 100 or 150 pages. This Women Do Not Ask is around 16 pages article. It's a very important article, not only for women, for men also, for boys and girls. I strongly recommend you to read this article. And this is the GitHub link to these readings. So you will find both of these documents on the GitHub page. So after today's class, so there are 2 assignments that I'm giving you. First of all is to write a summary. So it's an individual assignment. You will be writing a summary of Women Do Not Ask. And I want you to reflect on what you feel about the theme of the article and what it is saying. What you learned, what you did not know before, what you disagree with, and what do you think about the gender equality gap in remuneration. It's a very common thing in political debates, in corporate debates. And it would be good to be familiar with these kind of things also. Again, it comes down to negotiation. So negotiation seeps in each and every part of our waking lives. And we have to be open, both in our eyes and ears, to actually observe it. It should be 300 words. Please do not exceed the word limit. And what I'm looking at it, so when I'm asking you to write an article, I'm looking for your quality of thought and your originality of the thought and your reflections. So please don't just summarize the article. Have a critical look at it, read it, and then digest it, and then try to understand, okay, what do I feel about what the author has written? You don't have to agree with what the author has written. I just want you to critically evaluate it and then understand on some points. So the quality of thought really matters to me. It doesn't matter to me if you're good in writing English or not so good. That's not important at this point of time. And I have zero tolerance for plagiarism. So please don't copy paste from anywhere. That will be automatically marked null. So I will be uploading this assignment on the classroom after today's class. The second task I am asking you to do is a real world negotiation. So suppose you need to go out to some market or some shop and you're trying to buy something. And when the shopkeeper tells you the price, try to negotiate. Okay, try to do this activity. And having now understood the fundamental principles of negotiation of perception, emotions, communication, and keeping the eyes on the issue and not on the person, I think now when you go to the market and negotiate, you can apply what you have sort of become aware of and then write about that experience. So that is your second assignment. So, and don't be afraid to hear no. We hear no all the time. I mean, the success rate is very, very low when it comes to hearing a yes. So I would like to know your experience of real world negotiation. What was it that you were negotiating for and how did you deal it with? And if the first negotiation is not successful, then you have to go to the second negotiation and see that when people say no, why they are saying no. Try to understand. And how do you feel when they are saying no? And under what circumstances the no makes you very much uncomfortable. So to succeed in real life, we have to really get very comfortable in our tolerance to hear no and become resilient. So this is the second task for the topic on negotiations. Is that clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, sometimes
Yes, ma'am.
We think that negotiation should be done or should not be done. Obviously, I'm not asking you to do negotiation with a vendor or hawker who already have hard time making ends meet in their own lives. I mean, but certain established shopkeepers, if you go, for example, the shop that is selling utensils for the kitchen, you want to buy something, you can negotiate with them. Or if you're purchasing some bulk amount of ration for your house, and then you can ask them to lessen the price from the total bill. Yeah, I think there's nothing to be afraid and ashamed about negotiating with shopkeepers. I think just look at it as an experiment. Okay, just experiment. You'll understand the psychology of the shopkeeper. You'll understand your own psychology, and you will get to learn a lot more because negotiating with shopkeeper teaches us a lot. In fact, when we see our mothers negotiating, we sometimes they really surprise us, and we can learn so much from them. So I will put that assignment on the classroom. I think you will have to upload a Google Doc, or because there is a word limit attached, so maybe I'll create a Google form. So I'm still thinking on that. I'll let you know, Aviraj. Yeah. So hopefully today's session was informative for you, and I look forward to reading your reflections on the article that I have given, and I really look forward to your experience on real life negotiation. I think it will be very much learning experience for you also, and I would be very curious to know your findings and reflections on that. Yeah. So